Welcome back to I See What You're Saying, the Disciplined Listening Podcast. It is my pleasure to introduce our next guest, Lindsey Braciale. Lindsey is the founder and CEO of Advocations, an organization that she has shepherded while they have built relationships with disabled individuals and corporations that has helped them put over 17,000 people with disabilities back to work. It's an astounding accomplishment and an astounding number that continues to grow. And her team have done this by helping make jobs more accessible for people with disabilities, while also helping organizations use disabilities and hiring people with disabilities as a competitive advantage. She is very well educated. She is very well credentialed. She has tons of experience, has created many innovative solutions along her career path, but perhaps more importantly, is extremely passionate about the work that she does, the people that she connects with, and the experiences that she helps create for the people that she puts back to work. Her and her team do amazing work, and she has so many incredible insights to share with all of us that we can provide across our business and family lives. Concepts like supplying people with the dignity of risk and how important it is for them and what they can learn from it. What she and her team have learned helping people be successful in a world that wasn't built for them, and how we can all apply that to our world. How as employers, we can start to realize the difference between body jobs and brain jobs and what that means for success. How we can all learn to identify people who might have hidden skill sets that we've never been able to identify before and can help them take advantage of. And what we can all do to come together and make a more human work culture. Her and her team really do amazing work, and there are so many lessons we can all apply to our everyday lives and businesses as well. Thank you all for taking the time to join this conversation. And before we turn it over to Lindsey, I do want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. First, we have Humane. Please, if you've ever thought about developing the skill set of evaluating changing emotions through shifting facial expressions and nonverbal communication to understand what people are likely thinking and feeling at any moment in time, I highly recommend you head over to humantel.com. Check out all of their research, all of their blogs, all of their material, then choose which online training program is best for you and enter the code inclusive25 for 25% off all of their best-in-class online self-paced learning. Please also head over to certifiedinterviewer.com for the International Association of Interviewers. That's where you can learn more about the qualifications to join the association, what the benefits are at the individual and group level. You can explore their online resources, networking, and content that's available. You can learn more and check out their schedule for their local, regional, and national educational events that they put on every year. And it's where you can also learn more about the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. What does it take to qualify? Do you meet the qualifications? What does it take to earn and maintain the designation? And what can it mean for you and your career, both currently and as you continue to grow to achieve your goals? All of that and more at certifiedinterviewer.com. And Inclusive. Please head over to Inclusive, where you can learn more about the customized educational experiences our clients ask us to facilitate for leaders at all levels of their organization to teach them how to obtain the everyday confession by encouraging people to save face and align their self-image to share more details more accurately when they're necessary in all of their business conversations. All that and more at inclusive.com. Again, thank you all for taking the time to join us today. We truly appreciate it. And now, without further ado, I introduce to you Lindsey Braciale. Good morning, Lindsey. It is so great to see you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be here today.
I'm excited to be here. Thanks for the opportunity.
Oh, you are very welcome. So it's been too long since we've had a chance to see each other and talk. So many things that I am excited about to talk about and also really proud to share because you do amazing work here in Charlotte and well beyond all across the country. And I'll summarize it real quick. Hopefully I get it right. What you and your team do is you partner with organizations, companies and individuals with disabilities in order to help those disabled individuals not just get any job, but get the jobs that they are qualified for and have the ability to excel and add value to those organizations in.
Good job.
Thank
Nailed
you.
it.
Thank you. Okay, we're a
Nailed
sub
it.
conversation right there. I'm going out on a win. That's as far as we go. So with that as the backdrop, the first question that I would love to ask you is, of all the individuals that you've helped either jumpstart or get back into their careers, what is one of the more powerful lessons you've learned watching someone with disabilities excel in the workforce?
That's a great question. I would have to say the most important lesson that I learned and relearned is that as people helping people with disabilities, we're not the hero in someone else's journey. And I think oftentimes this field, it sort of chooses you, right? You have a passion, you have a connection to mine as a social justice piece. I think that people with disabilities aren't given a fair shot to really demonstrate their value in a way that others have opportunities. But what I find is there are a lot of groups that are formed because they want to be the hero in someone else's journey. And so one of the biggest ways that anytime we launch a program or do anything, making sure that the individual is driving the bus, so to speak. And we are just, a tool in the toolkit to make sure that they can be as successful as possible.
It's a great perspective to have. And I would guess that for the people or organizations that get involved, when they make themselves the hero in the story, I would like to imagine that a lot of times that's unintentional, or at least it wasn't their primary interest. It just sort of evolved that way. I'm sure there are some people that are trying to create a reputation or whatever, and they set out to be the hero to start with. But I would like to think that for the majority of people, they aren't. And to allow, we were talking about our kids earlier. It's like
Mhm.
when raising kids, it's really easy to jump in and do everything for our kids, but they've got to lead it. They've got to be out front. They've got to be learning. And so when we're getting involved in helping people really in any situation, giving them the power and the ownership and allowing them to show their capabilities is so important.
Exactly. And so let me kind of clarify a little bit. So when you were talking about, our kids, it's hard to watch them struggle. It's a lot easier for us. We're a little bit bigger. We've done this before. And oftentimes what we find is kids that parents have defined as having special needs, and at the end of the day, kind of see them and have this like protective bubble. Oftentimes they don't get afforded the same dignity of risk, right? I can either succeed or fail on my own terms. And that's really what I mean when I say be the hero, that we allow people, obviously, maybe don't want people to fail too far, but most of the best lessons I've learned in life are when I wasn't successful, and then building resilience beyond that. And I think that that's one of the core benefits when companies hire people with disabilities is they're pretty resilient because they've basically, for the most part, lived in a world that wasn't designed for them. And so being able to kind of navigate that in a way, because oftentimes we just forget about disability in our day to day.
You just said two things that I think are fantastic, and I want to make sure people don't overlook. The first one was the dignity of risk. What a fantastic statement. Like, we're helping people preserve their dignity by accepting the same level of risks, by going through the same things, by learning the same lessons and not necessarily guiding them through it or doing it for them. The dignity of risk. What a powerful phrase that is. And the thought of people who are trying to be successful in a world that wasn't made for them.
Mhm.
Or was that the way
Yeah,
that you said it?
it's designed for them. It doesn't matter what type of disability you have, right? Our world is designed for the norm, right? And being able, when you're on any sort of extreme, regardless of what it is, you have to just sort of figure it out. And people haven't really caught on so much about universal accessibility, but we take advantage of that as things every day. Curb cuts, if you have, luggage, nothing's worse than having to like carry your luggage anywhere. It's like very basic things that if that curb cut wasn't there, that bars access for somebody and for others. And, just in a variety of different ways, technology, making sure that that can be accessible because while it creates opportunities, there are things that you're unintentionally excluding. So anytime you're building something, yes, you're including people, but take a time to pause and think who you might be unintentionally excluding. Because even in my space, we do it all the time. we're trying to cater to one group, and now we make a terrible user experience for a different type of disability.
And it's easy to do with the best of intentions. And how can
Mhm.
any one of us think of every contingency or every possible group? And in some situations, there might be some that honestly probably wouldn't be interfacing anyway, but trying to think about as many of those as possible. And it leads me to another question, because there is such a wide range of what we might refer to as disabled or disabilities.
Mhm.
Imagine, hopefully this is an appropriate way to say it. If not, please tell me. It can range from high functioning to less functioning, I think is likely an appropriate way to say it. You can tell me if that was not. But when you think about ways that disabled people can excel in the workforce, I would love it if you could share some that might be commonly thought of and others that might be uncommonly thought of. People with certain disabilities are actually set up really well to do different things or be successful in different roles. Could you share some of those examples with us, please?
Sure. I think prior to COVID, my answer would have been a little bit different. So I will explain how my answer would have been pre-COVID and now post-COVID, or wherever we are in COVID. And we always think about jobs for the most part, kind of the head up or the bottom down, right? That people can either use their body or use their brain. And then we identify whatever the job needs to be and pipeline people into opportunities where there doesn't need to be a whole lot of accommodation. And when companies think of accommodations, they think, dollar signs. But for most of the accommodations that we've created prior to COVID, that would be like flexible workspace, being able to kind of get up and walk around if you have a back injury, or not having to, do XYZ, things that just enable us to be a little bit more flexible. And then those typically don't cost that much. In terms of productivity, it probably saves companies money, even though they might not see it that way early on. And then what we noticed during COVID was all of a sudden, all the things that we used to have to fight for in terms of accommodation became mainstream. So the ability to work from home used to be one of the toughest accommodations that we had to be able to navigate. Oftentimes, it was just that headspace that everybody had to go through of, well, if you're working from home, how do I know you're working? Right. And then it was funny, the things that, it used to take a 6-month process for us to get approval potentially. And most of the time, it never got approved for somebody to be able to work from home. And then all of a sudden, everybody can do a hybrid type work or whatnot. And what we found in the disability space is this enabled more and more people to work than ever before. And that's what, kind of like really bums me out when I hear companies are, returning back to the office, right? Because that might potentially close the door on opportunities that we noticed were open. From the other side, and then I'll let you jump in, it allowed people to get jobs without having to define or disclose that they have a disability. Because, and I think that that's also been one of the, it's always a big question for the people that we support. When do I, tell somebody I have a disability? And then because we don't want somebody to be potentially overlooked, or, companies are always looking for one reason to choose someone else, and making sure that that is not the reason why they go in a different direction. So I think that not only did the workplace flexibility component just get baked into work from home, but secondly, not having to have that anxiety of walking into an interview. A lot of jobs were virtual, and then that opened a lot more doors for opportunity.
So really what you're saying was, if you could have incited a global pandemic in 2009, which is when you started Advocations, then the success, I'm obviously
Yeah,
just
no, we would have done. So yeah, instead of placing, over 20,000 people in jobs, we could have just, there'd be
hundreds of
no,
thousands.
right.
If only we had known.
I
But you
know.
raised so many good points there. And the one that I kind of want, I think kind of the remote job stuff makes a lot of sense. But the one that I want to harp back on is, whether they want to admit it or not, organizations, and specifically hiring managers, the interview process is often exclusionary. It is not inclusionary. And that's not necessarily from a disability standpoint. That's from any standpoint. Oh,
Mhm.
this person doesn't have 10 years of experience. I'm throwing that resume away. Never mind that I'm not actually looking for somebody with 10 years of experience. I'm looking with someone with the skills and attributes I believe it takes 10 years of experience to develop. But I think lazily, so I'm going to throw that one away. This person didn't go to good enough university. This person hasn't worked in this industry. Like so the candidate selection process is exclusionary to begin with. And that's a very real question for when do I disclose that I have this disability or that I have this issue? I don't want to be discriminated against either intentionally or unintentionally. I don't want people to make negative assumptions about me or ask me questions that they wouldn't ask somebody else or might be more embarrassing. I have a very good friend who is a stroke survivor. He had a stroke at a young age, and he now has aphasia when he speaks. He's super smart, but he doesn't always have an easy time choosing his
Finding the
words.
words.
Yeah. And he's a little bit older for somebody trying to re-enter the workspace. And so when I was trying to help him out a little bit with some things, on his resume, he actually he listed the break in his resume as, he survived a stroke. And then he listed, some of the after effects of the stroke. And his thought was, I just want people to know, like, I don't mind talking about it. It's obvious. I don't want it to be a secret. I was like, dude, they'll never admit it in court. But as soon as somebody reads that resume, you're not getting through.
Right.
You're just not. So we need to take that off. We'll come up with a way to address it during the interview when you start the conversation, because it will need to be addressed. But let's not put it on the piece of paper that they're going to read before they ever meet you. And just, you show up on time, you're well presented, you've got your documentation with you, you can speak. Let's work on what we can do to create a good impression before we inadvertently create some of those hurdles that you just mentioned, which, to quote my 6-year-old son, we can say are unfair, but at the same time are very real.
Right. And now let's take it from the flip side, right? So why did he put that on there anyways?
Because, go ahead.
No, you go.
He told me he put it on there because he didn't want it to be a secret. He wanted it to be upfront. Like, he knew he was going to have to talk about it, and he knew he was going to get questioned about the gap in his resume. So he just put it there to be upfront and honest about what happened.
Right. Right. And so when you have a disability that people can see, you often have to talk about your disability way more often than you actually probably think about your disability. Right. Yeah. And by him putting it on there, I see this all the time. I think you gave him really good advice, because you're right. There's, let's not give them one more reason to potentially exclude you from the process. But it might be, in some ways, you get a lot of trauma, right? Every time that you're rejected, we all kind of build up these scabs. And it's potentially, maybe his logic could have been, this will help me weed out employers that probably aren't a good fit for me anyway.
Good. Yeah.
And then sort of save me from having to have this uncomfortable conversation. We have people, wheelchair users, for example, it's oftentimes they don't disclose that they're in a wheelchair and then they show up. One of the things we try to do is make sure that we have enough information regarding the check-in process of the interview. So that way it's not the awkward, oh no, I need to have my ID so I can check in with security. Oh, my ID is my book bag behind me. Do you mind going through my personal items and finding my ID? Because oftentimes what that ends up doing is, after the interview is done, the person's going, well, what else am I going to have to help them out with? And then without fail, they might not say it out loud, but they're going to think, am I going to have to help them in the bathroom? And it's been uncomfortable kind of things that at the end of the day, it's always a catch-22. How informed can we get? But at the end of the day, that's kind of why Advocations exist. We try to be that bridge between a company to give them the confidence. They don't need to have everything right. They just truly need to have, just enough things in place that it's not embarrassing, and that you don't get duped unless you're trying. So basically having the feedback mechanism. So as soon as you can pretend that, we often hear companies say, oh my goodness, we'll work on hiring people with disabilities in 3 years, but we have a lot of work to do to get ready. And the best way to get ready, it's kind of like that idea, like, you don't know how you're going to do in a fight until you get punched in the face, right? Like, it's the lessons that you can learn by hiring people with disabilities will actually make your business better. And so you need to do it quicker than you think you're ready for.
I would agree with that. By the time we think we're ready, it's either too late or we're going to continue to find reasons why we're not ready. The only way to get ready is to do it, make the necessary adjustments along the way, and quite honestly, learn from the people that you're bringing on board. Because as much research as I might do, and as hard as I might try, and as well-intentioned as I might be, How am I going to know what somebody with any given disability really needs unless it's one that I share? So
Agreed. Agreed.
I'm
And
never going to be ready. I got to get them on board, and they have to help design the process.
100%. And I think making sure that that's upfront and understood. I think that there's a lot of people with disabilities that are hired, and then all of a sudden this becomes kind of a second part of a job they're not getting paid for, which is helping inform that company. But that's sort of what you have to do. It's that idea that when you're the first one in the door, hold the door open for someone else. And being able to really recognize those trailblazers in a way that they're making it today, everything that they do actually makes it better for somebody else in the future.
And that's like when you use the word, the word, excuse, I can't talk anymore. The word trailblazer, I think is an apt description. So as we're talking a little bit about organizations, my background for people that don't know, that there were a couple of years when I was younger that I spent working with disabled students who were in mainstream school curriculum. So they were in the regular classroom. And then I've worked with several employers who have had disabled individuals as part of our workforce. And I've had several clients as well. And like a lot of us, I've been a consumer or interfaced with businesses that had it. So I am an unabashed advocate of having people with disabilities in the workforce, in jobs, maximizing their capabilities and honestly pushing their limits like we would expect anybody to push their
Mhm.
limits. Often the conversation is centered around what these people are capable of. And we'll come back to that because that's a very important conversation. What are the benefits that you have seen from people who are already in the workforce and now are working side by side with these disabled individuals? How does that interaction not just benefit companies from the bottom line, but benefit individuals through the interaction and the relationships?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'll give your audience a little bit of context, right? Because when I say disabled employment, a lot of times people don't even understand what that looks like. It might be, I think most times people think of the Walmart greeter that actually that role doesn't even exist anymore. But just to give you kind of an idea, the jobs that we place people in are all across the map. They're very focused on exactly where their skill set lies and then also matching it with opportunity. We work with companies and I started Advocations now 16 years ago. So we've evolved and grown and learned some lessons in the early kind of 2010, 2012 timeframe. As a staffing and recruiting company, I started looking at our numbers and I was surprised to see people who happen to be on the autism spectrum were retaining their jobs a lot longer than potentially other disability types. And so we partnered with a bunch of other large national autism led organizations, and we created a program that would empower companies it was called Advice. And the idea was that you already have jobs available. Let's figure out how we can build in the supports necessary for both the company and the people to thrive. And what we found from that experience, and I'll go through, there was a lot of really bad lessons learned, and hence why I don't do those programs anymore. But for the most part, one of the biggest kind of takeaways was the employees that already are connected to the work, if they have a kid with a disability or something else. Sometimes those are actually our hardest people to work with once it becomes an employment because they have a more difficult time holding people accountable for the work that they're doing. And so it kind of thinks, when the company's launching this, they have all these people raise their hands because they're excited. And we try to find the person that's kind of looking down at the bottom of the floor and, not wanting to engage because they think that this is going to be more work. And what by really getting that person bought into the process, they, can really hold the program to the same standards. So this is not going to be kind of a charitable endeavor. At the end of the day, the business is in business to, protect their bottom line. And, as companies are broadening what, people, planet, profits, all those other ways that you can categorize what you're doing and the impact that you have. And your core reason for being in business is to make money. And so the last thing we want to do is make a company less profitable. And what we found was we actually had a higher attendance rate, less accidents, and the managers that were potentially not on board at the beginning, their feedback was it made them be a better manager. that it took assumptions and the things that they would just assume people would figure out of the game completely. And I'll pause for a second and then I have an example if you have anything to interject, because I don't like when I'm podcasting people to keep talking.
Go. People are here to listen to you, not listen to me. So please, I did want to reinforce what you're saying. And I love the fact I just wrote it down that people who were initially resistant said that it made them a better manager. And to me, this gets to in many ways, the essence of the issue. Now I'm going to stop because I want you to share the example. I do think it's a perfect example.
Thank you. Thank you. So when you're working with somebody, and I think now the term is neurodiverse, right? Where, that didn't exist before I started, but neither did the term social entrepreneur. So what can we say? We made lots of progress. But you would find, like, as we do training, we explain to people that, it's best to think about disability when it's something that happens to be neurodiverse, is that you're speaking to a non-native English speaker. And what are the different things that you have to take? There's assumptions that you would typically make because they understand the culture, conversation, and nonverbals that we just sort of accept and get by with. If we took those things out of the equation, because now you're speaking to somebody that may not understand English or, type things, it kind of shifts somebody's mindset, because oftentimes we're working with companies that are global and they understand what that looks like. And now we've created a roadmap and a point of reference, because when you hear the word autism, people go to the one person, or maybe now there's a lot more people that know more than one person with autism. But if you can take that point of comparison, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. So the worst thing that you can do is try to generalize that, Johnny was unable to do X. And so now all people with autism cannot do that, because that is where things get really mucky. And at the end of the day, you're not helping anybody in that process.
The autism spectrum in particular is so wide and has such variance from one far end to the other. I would say fortunately / unfortunately, I've had experience with both. When I was working in the school system with a particular child on, the real severe end, nonverbal, behavioral, like a lot of things that were going on. And I've had multiple interactions with people on the outer edge that are more higher functioning and have other issues that they deal with. And I wouldn't be surprised if there's plenty of people who are on that spectrum and have no idea that they are, just based on how they go through life every day. But that's another great way to consider it. How would you talk if you had to have a conversation with a non-English speaker, how would you do it to make sure that you were clear, that you were concise, that you were understood, that you were showing respect, that you were demonstrating empathy, that you were giving them the opportunity to contribute? Like, I think that is the perfect analogy. I like that one a lot.
And using visual supports, I think we often just assume that if I say something to you, that it's going to stick, and making sure that you have ways to kind of cue somebody back if they might have missed something in that process. And that can, most of the ways that we set up, someone to be successful, and basically the company to be successful, is to understand what are those tools, what are those rules of engagement, as we explain, to make sure that people, can be as productive as possible. And then what we often find is that once a company sort of understands that, then those are the things that actually go mainstream, because they see the benefit of, Lindsey's not a morning person. Probably don't ask her lots of really important questions before she's had like her second cup of coffee, or in this case, my second refill, because I'm part of the parent zip club. And if I don't get my 3 refills a day, like, it's not been a good day. So, but being able to really kind of understand that at the end of the day, we focus on disability from the outside. And I think I said this before, we think about disability when we're talking to somebody with a disability a lot more than they're actually thinking about it themselves. They're experts in their own space. They've learned how to navigate life. And so I think at the end of the day, if we can move beyond the assumptions and really get down to the core of where an impact can be made, we can make a lot more progress in this space.
Absolutely. And I'd love to talk a little bit about some of the fears and stereotypes from both sides of the equation that stop that from happening. My own personal rant in the middle here in candidate selection and interview processes to begin with. I feel like not nearly enough time in most scenarios is spent focusing on the actual skills and attributes it takes to be successful in this role. Who has those? How do I identify that? How do I put them in position to be successful? I feel like way too many times the interviewing process is based on what's my gut feeling? How well do I like this person? The one specific
Making me
background.
warm fuzzies, right?
Yeah. Like,
They
are
laugh
they
at my jokes.
are they charismatic? Do they go to this university? Do they have this certification? Do they have? And this window dressing that, and I've said this in programs that I've taught before, in many cases, we all know that when we hire somebody, there's a chance it's not going to work out. We all know that. So, especially if I'm a hiring manager in a larger organization, I don't want to get blamed if it doesn't work out. So, the best way to make sure I don't get blamed if it doesn't work out is to say, hey, Lindsey, I hired the guy with the most experience. I hired the woman with the PhD. I hired the person who's been in this industry for 37 years, yeah, using the same habits for 37 years. So, if they give themselves a way out in the hiring process, as opposed to thinking, wait a minute, what are the skills that I really need? What if I need somebody who becomes so focused on one singular task that they won't let it go till it's done and done perfect? Imagine if I had somebody like that on my team. Oh, I wonder who might have that skill. Well, there might be somebody with a neurodiverse background that has exactly that skill. And that's what makes them happy. And that's what gives them fulfillment, because they get to chase this thing down to the very end. So I'm done ranting. This is all about you. My apologies.
No, it's so true. Like, right? Like there's a lot of burnout and forensic, like following the money, so to speak, right? And so that because there's a lot of loose ends that you chase. And again, I'm not an expert in this, but we do place people in these jobs where it leads to burnout because you're not finding whatever you ended up looking for. But the folks that we place, they stay in that job a lot longer because of the fact that they get the motivation from the repetitive aspects of the job, not the end result, where often more times than not, people kind of, anyways, it's just a total aside. One of the, I had a really good thing I was going to talk about when you were saying that, because it's so good, but we'll come back to it. I'm sure
I
it'll
talked
hit
too
me
long.
again.
That's a polite way to tell me that I talked too long. Thank you very much for that.
It's like, oh, that's a perfect example. And then now it's.
So when it comes back, it comes back. Cut me off
Okay.
as soon as it comes back. So what I would love to do is take a couple of minutes and explore a little bit some of the stereotypes that stop organizations from considering neurodiverse candidates or disabled candidates. I guess let's do that first, and then we'll look at it from the candidate side. I know that money comes up, and I know that accommodations come up, but if we get beyond sort of the what's obvious on paper, why somebody looking at a P&L might be hesitant, in your experience, what have been some of the real misconceptions, stereotypes, or concerns that have stopped hiring managers from onboarding a supremely qualified candidate who just happens to be disabled or neurodiverse?
Oh, I don't think this podcast is long enough. But I did think of the example that you're talking about. And I can lead into that. Before I started Advocations, I worked for vocational rehab, which is a federally funded state agency that helps people with disabilities get jobs. And that's where the idea for Advocations came about, because I saw it not really working. It's like going to the DMV and asking them to, change your oil, right? This doesn't make sense, right? And so how can we be an outside influence that really connects with the business to talk to the business on a business to business level, and really focus on the things that, what are your highest turnover positions? What are the things that keep you up at night as an HR or hiring manager? All of those different things. And so my gap employment between vocational rehab and starting Advocations was I tried to sell copiers, because I realized I needed to get tough. Because if anybody's ever tried to do door-to-door sales, like nothing is more humbling than, I'll never forget this lady. She made me cry in my car, and because I was like, oh my goodness, I have a master's degree, and she made me feel this big. And it's those situations where I would just understand, like, nobody's been fired for buying a Xerox. So who was I to try to talk to them about this, like, kind of at the end, back then it was like this new RICO, right? Because we've used Xerox, nobody's going to get mad at me. Why would I ever change? Because it just works. And I think that that's the exact thing that goes through a hiring manager's mind when they're looking at candidates. It's what's the safe bet? How am I tracked and measured in my performance at my job? And then what do I need to do to kind of reach those goals? And if you don't have diversity related metrics built into why, a hiring manager should be giving a little bit more time and attention to finding people that are not just the Xerox candidates, then at the end of the day, you're just not going to see the outcomes that you're looking for. And so as we are helping companies, I can give an example about what we do with Wells Fargo. So we've worked with Wells Fargo for over a decade now. Thanks to them, they sent me to business school. So I appreciate it because they were like, we kind of like what you're doing. But you are like in your 20s and have no idea how to run a company. So we're a really big company and we need you to figure it out quick. And so I did, which is good. And as our relationship evolved, we were able to start understanding that they are a well-oiled machine, right? Everybody's a cog in the process. And if we try to deviate from that in any way, as soon as there's a change in their business, we're going to be eliminated, right? We saw that with the mortgages. We had so many people working in the processing of mortgages. And then all of a sudden, I hear on the news that Wells Fargo decided not to be in the mortgage industry anymore. And I thought, oh man, we have so many people working in Des Moines. How do we really kind of shift with the needs of the business? We never push back and say, why did you make that business decision? Rather, we pivot and try to figure out how to make it work for them. The way that we set it up is that people start in a job. So we're not looking for entry-level jobs. We're looking for entry points within an organization because it's the job that if you know somebody, you can get your foot in the door. And then once you get your foot in the door, like now all of a sudden it's just being able to kind of leverage that because all of those things, all that pressure that the hiring manager has on them to make the right choice go away because you have somebody that's vouching for you. And then by us getting people having their foot in the door, those hiring managers are actually able to see what that person can do and where they could fit better within their organization. And so our roadmap and pathway for success is sort of like that puppy dog close of, let's do a demo with this copy machine so I can get everybody super excited about it. And then it's like, 1,000-pound or 500-pound piece of equipment that now we're going to have to like figure out how to move back out of here, right? It's like, let's get somebody's foot in the door, figure out what they could do. And then at the end of the day, it serves both sides because now we're not pigeonholing people into opportunities that they need to stay in forever. Because that's one of the biggest challenges with disabled employment is that people get jobs and then they think that's the only job that they can do because it took so long for them to get that job. And my goal is not my success and how I kind of get excited is that our goal is to actually help people build a level of stability within their life that they're no longer relying on disability related benefits. And the way we work and we partner closely with the Social Security Administration is we help people realize that once you start working, you can actually, there's programs and work incentives that enable you to earn more money, make more savings. And then if something happens, there's always kind of a safety net to catch you. So you're incentivized to earn more money rather than oftentimes what people are told if they have a disability is, oh, you can only work 20 hours. Well, if somebody ever tells you that, then say, you have no idea what you're talking about because that 20 hours doesn't mean anything unless you know how much somebody's going to get paid.
All great points and a great segue to the flip side question that I wanted to ask. I feel like, and again, you're in the fight every day. I'm not. I feel like a lot of the conversation for disabled employment is around getting employers to realize the value of the opportunity. I have to think that there is a reasonable portion of the fight that is getting people with disabilities to believe in themselves and to go through the process and to weather the storm and to get back up and to build that resilience, not just to obtain that entry point position. I love the way you differentiated entry level and entry point, not just to obtain that entry point position, but to then use that as a springboard. Okay, now I'm in. And now that I'm in, I'm going to work to continue to develop my capabilities and elevate my potential and strive that to meet that potential. So that's a super long-winded setup to ask, what are some of the biggest fears? Maybe that's too strong a word. What are some of the biggest fears that are currently stopping capable, disabled people from working really hard to enter the workforce?
Oh, well, I used to answer this question totally differently before I became a parent. Because if you had ever asked me before I was a mom, what somebody's biggest barrier to employment is, I would probably say the family unit or like the parent, right? That, if we would place people that didn't have a really good family connection, sort of were forced to figure it out on their own, and they were always more successful. And it was because they didn't have a plan B. And the more we bake in a plan B, C, D, F, we've already told the person they're not going to be successful. So it's okay if you live at home with me for the rest of my life. Meanwhile, those parents are going to bed every night thinking, I need to live one more day because this world is not designed for my son or daughter. And that statement gives me chills because I've heard it more times than I like to admit. And parents, by focusing so far in the future and think that they can't control, it oftentimes really narrows in where the opportunities may lie for that person. And so being able to kind of work together as a team, we find that, people with disabilities, again, I talked about the resilience level and oftentimes, they get it, right? Like they're not going to get 100% of the shots that they take. And what we need to stop doing is that parent in the background or somebody making sure that if they didn't get the shot, that they're with the rebound, right? Like that we just need to kind of let it sit because, that is the best way I can kind of tend to figure it out is that if we can help people that don't have those connections, and you would think that people that have, it's like, how can we help those parents that care so much use their energy in a way that actually serves the cause versus trying to keep their kids safe? And when I say kid, I'm talking about like adult kids. I think that that's the other piece. It's that, thinking that this is all there is left, or this is all life is going to bring them. Making sure that between that 18 to 24 period where somebody is graduating and if college isn't where they're going, making sure that they don't sit at home playing video games and losing all the skills that they just gotten from learning how to wake up, go to school, attend school, blah, blah, blah. Oftentimes we don't get phone calls until the parent has missed this key window of opportunity where there's a lot more learning that needs to take place. And then secondly and lastly, volunteering doesn't lead to employment. And so we get into this perpetual cycle that, well, they just need to build skills. Well, what we found is that people build skills when they're not held to account because they're just a volunteer. So people are just happy with whatever they do. It actually reinforces really bad skills. So don't fall into the volunteer trap. Really, and this is what I explained to all the clients that we work with. Yes, I had to do like an internship or things like that where I could gain things, but I was actually always gaining more from my involvement. But if the power dynamic is different and that employer, wherever you're trying to build skills, is gaining a lot more than you are, then rethink it and be able to figure out something else that you can be doing with your time that would better position you to get something that is paid. So don't just be happy to have somewhere to be. Really understand that a paycheck is more than the money that goes into your bank account. And that's, I guess, the underlying piece. Oftentimes parents that are of means in some level don't realize that a paycheck isn't just typically about the dollar signs.
It's another great perspective. Now I'm going to ask you potentially a loaded, unfair question.
Ooh, I like this one.
So
Let me get uncomfortable.
well, no. That's not. I'm
Oh,
uncomfortable asking the question. I don't expect you to be
oh,
uncomfortable answering it. But steer it the direction it needs to go. You've mentioned multiple times in this conversation, or in one specific instance, you mentioned if you met one person with autism, you met one person with autism, and that can likely be said about so many different disabilities. So I understand that we cannot paint with too broad a brush. We cannot just make assumptions. We can't say if person has X, that equals Y. But to the degree that you feel comfortable and that it's respectful to all involved, what are some of the skills or attributes that people with certain disabilities bring to the table that employers or other people they interact with might not know about?
um, I think that the most intangible kind of quality that somebody, for the most part, we're going to say like, and I hate
Yeah.
generalizing,
Yeah.
but is the excitement to get to work, right? Like, so there's a lot of like, that's one of the biggest kind of feedback points. You know, uh, we work with people that it takes them, maybe 2 hours to get ready, right? With the crunch on skilled labor, having people that require a personal care assistant to like show up at their house and physically get them out of bed. And then it takes them 2 hours to get to work. And potentially they've had to ride a bus and then they show up to work. Like the things that people have to kind of just check off in their day to day that I mean, I live a away, like Segway ride away from work, right? I can hop out of bed, take a shower, and I'm on my way in, 26 minutes or less.
You've
And
never timed that before.
yeah, for sure. My 5-year-old throws some like cogs and like kicks in that now, but back in the day, it was like, oh man, because I'm not a morning person, but if I need to get into work by 10, I can get there if I just click my alarm off at 9:17. So I think it's like just part of like that, being ready for all of the bad things that potentially, and I put bad in quotes, right? Like everybody's got their own stuff that they're going through. And I think that it provides kind of the work culture to be a little bit more human. I think that that's the biggest takeaway because some things people just can't hide, right? Like it is who they are, and this is what you kind of get. But oftentimes in the workplace, you sort of have to have two different personas. You have to have your out of work persona, and then you have to have your work life. And people with disabilities are often not able to have that luxury, right? Like even the accommodations process is dehumanizing. You have to have your direct report manager be able to see your most like intimate medical records, just in order to get something like the things like we have HIPAA and all these other things, but that just goes out the door when a company is concerned about X, right? And so I think that the thing that people with disabilities bring to a work environment is that humanity that connects us all. And most of the time people are not comfortable talking about disability, nor do they need to, like, should be like maybe they should be, but it's not like you're there to work, right? But I think that that's the piece where people all of a sudden start opening up a little bit more about all the other things that they can't control and might be able to see it just a little bit differently. Like, hopefully that answers your question because there's specific like jobs that are so much better suited for. It's kind of like the gender way that we break down jobs, right? Like I think air traffic controllers are so much better as women because we can multitask a million times better than a dude, right? Or like all the different things, right?
I'm
So
so offended.
well, it's the truth. I mean, you can't lie with the data, right? I think, the sharpshooter thing, I think women are better at that now too. But I think women are better at anything. My dad always told me the best guy for the job is a woman, or the best man for a job is a woman. And so it kind of instilled into me. But it's that idea that we all bring something to the table. It's our job as a company and an organization and somebody that you're going to be working with is to kind of move away all the things that really don't matter and cut to the core of how somebody can be successful. And when you're doing that, disability really comes as an afterthought. If it's the right job, that's the problem is a lot of times people take a square peg and plug it into a round hole and then they build in the supports. And this leads me kind of to the beginning of our conversation is I helped Johnny get this job, but now Johnny needs me to be beside him every day at work because it's not the right job. And now Johnny can do, 10% or 20% of his job duties with my support. Like what we need to really do is figure out like, what are those jobs that Johnny can do that over time my support can fade because he can build in that capability. And if that's not the case, then it really kind of undermines the success of what Johnny can do. We need to focus on those things rather than how can I build in all of these supports that everything has to go right every day? Like I have to show up for work because Johnny needs me, and then that manager needs to stay because he's been bought into this program, all of those different things. That's why we're not having the success in the space that I believe we can is because we're keep carving out opportunities rather than making companies be accountable for change.
And when you talk about making sure somebody's in the right job, or to the degree that we can, doing our best to put somebody in the right job, That's true for all employees.
Hmm.
If you've got somebody that doesn't qualify for a specific disability, any specific disability, and they're in the wrong job, they're going to require more managerial oversight and more managerial time. And have all the, it's so different. It might be more of a focus. It might be more obvious. It might be more of an upfront concern, but it's no different than any other employee. When we talk about finding the right job for the right person, it gets back to the humanity of the workplace. I'm going to keep stealing what you say. I hope you don't mind. It gets back to the humanity in the workplace. Where am I putting the right person in the right job? It's a perfect point. I am curious because you've been doing this for so long and in multiple, when you were working, I already forgot. Where were you before you were selling printers?
Oh, vocational rehab.
Yes, I had vocation, but I lost the rehab work. So between your vocational rehab work and what you're doing now with Advocations, how has communicating with people with disabilities made you a better listener?
I think just in the same ways, I like to talk, right? So just a little bit of background, I was born with a hearing impairment. And so being able through surgeries to hear a lot better, all of a sudden, I was always reminded that you have two ears and one mouth, because I need to start using them more proportionally. And so I think that, just in the work that we do, every time I learn something every day, right? Like I think I said it earlier. If you're not in this space, if you're not duped because all of a sudden somebody either surprised you or didn't, that means you're doing your job, because that means you're not controlling the process. That you are truly, it's that difference between, I hate that, or I guess people love saying it, but that idea that you can be invited to the dance or whatever, like the idea that equality and equity and all of those differences, really making sure that that person is there in that process. That every time I need to like stop, listen, and sometimes people say things without actually saying them, right? It's that your friend with his resume, putting that out there actually probably just saved him from the uncomfortable truth of having a resume or having an interview with somebody and them wondering what the heck is going on when they can't find the right word, right? We work with people that, have speech impediments, stuttering, all of those things. And because I like to talk and I don't like an awkward silence, I will fill that as quick as anybody will give me a window of opportunity to do so. Like really taking a moment for pause, because in the pause, we can see where, it's those fears that end up coming through. And so I think as I've gotten better at what I do, when you're 20, you think you have all the answers, right? I started Advocations when I was 25 because I was just, fired up about this work and I saw a new business opportunity. But when people told me that, why did I not start it as a nonprofit, right? Because we often assimilate like basically disability is charity, right? Everything we've ever been taught about disability is that people need help. And what I found was when I started Advocations as a for-profit company, that companies pay us for the work that we do because we're providing something of value, that we're not only providing something at value, we actually charge a premium. So when companies are trying to kind of put us back into that staffing, like, markup thing, we talk about the premium service that we're able to offer that at the end of the day can contribute to our retention, which is 97%, right? We are there for the long term and making sure that not only people are staying in that job, but not staying with that job, but staying within that company, because now the company is going to see the return on the investment that they made by taking a chance on somebody.
97% retention.
Mm-hmm. So annually, it's because like, and to that point, I think when you look at the numbers for, state agencies and other things, right? They're focused on getting somebody in that job and having them stay for 90 days because that's when they close the case. And for us, that's when things are just getting fun because the honeymoon period, it's like people are done being polite. Now people are going to start getting real. And so being able to be committed to that company and the success of that individual, and then also realizing, sometimes we didn't get it right, but we're going to fix it. And so being able to help every time, if somebody isn't the best fit for the job and there's no other opportunities to try, helping them leave with grace and then helping them find that next opportunity. Because now we've figured out, one more thing. I never ask people what they want to do. I ask them what they don't want to do, because that is so much easier for us to kind of keep the world of possibilities there and then make sure that we're, not just leaning into the jobs that, they've been hearing that they could do for the last 10 years of their life.
It's a great way to look at it. Going back to the retention piece, congratulations. Yeah. What is so different about the candidates you place in the process you use that is helping achieve such a great retention rate, almost like an unheard of retention rate?
Well, I think there's a lot of contributing factors, right? It's already hard enough to get a job. So unfortunately, when you have a disability, it's even harder to get a job, right? The unemployment rate is more than doubled for a reason. It's just not easy to get a job. So if we're able to get somebody an opportunity that they're brought into understanding that I need to kind of try my best, because if I really want to work and we use money as the motivator. So when we start working with people, we work with them within their Social Security benefits and say, here's what you're making. You're on SSI. You're getting a check for $900 a month. Can you pay all your bills on that? And if you can't, what do we need to do to shift the way that your life is? And then to basically, the job is just that first kind of step. And then as they start kind of building into other things. So when you're on SSI, you start working, the government counts, every dollar you make and 50%. But then you have the stair step, so your benefits decreasing. But what they don't know is that you can actually, if you need to save for something like a car or anything else that can help you in life, you can continue to receive that check and put it into a savings account that will allow you to kind of grow. And so we start helping people become trust us in the process, because they're seeing the process work. Instead of, hey, you got this job, let's just cross our fingers and hope that you're going to be successful. We want to make sure that in 3 years from now, you're going to be in a better financial place than you are today. And the job is just the first piece. So while we focus on getting the job, the impact that we have is actually that longer path to where they would like to be in their life.
All great reasons. And another way to look at the process, or another reason I should say, to look at the process differently and not fall prey to some of these old stereotypes or old fears or concerns that are keeping people from taking advantage of the opportunity. Can't thank you enough for spending your time with us this morning. And I don't want to be the guy that stands between you and your third refill at Panera today. So with that, I am sincerely hopeful that people are listening to this conversation. They're learning, their perspectives are shifting. Maybe they're thinking about opportunities for people that they know in their life that might have disabilities, for their own organization, for maybe somebody else who's a manager in another organization that they might start seeing a fit. So if somebody is looking to reach out, connect with you, learn more from you, or engage with Advocations, where do they need to go and how do they do that?
Sure, that's a great question. I think starting at our website, so Advocations, ADVOCATIONS.io. We're a tech-driven company. We didn't get into that, but my background is actually computer science. So part of the reason we've been able to scale is through technology. So using Advocations.io, we have a chat bot. You can schedule an appointment and then just note that you want to meet with me. I'd be happy to talk to anybody that took the time to listen to this, because I think the more advocates we have outside of the disability space is where we can really make the greatest impact. So even if you have no idea even what to use in terms of words when you're describing disability, it's worth a call, because I'd love to have this conversation.
And I can vouch for that. The first time I met you, I saw you speak, and just feeling the passion that you had, the experience that you had, listening to you articulate it, the examples you were using, you made a pretty significant impression on me, and have only continued to reinforce that in our communications and interactions ever since. So I applaud you for the tremendous work that you and your team are doing. I know it's a hard fight. I remember then when COVID hit, there were some red tape legal issues that you were fighting to change. And
not even red tape. Just to put it out there, if you live in specific states like North Carolina, you are not able to work according to state law. Therefore, you're not able to collect unemployment. So everybody that we placed in jobs where everybody else was getting unemployment during COVID, They were just because of a law thinking that people with disabilities can't work.
Unbelievable. But you're out there fighting the fight. You're fighting it on all
Yes.
fronts. And I think it's important that people realize the dedication that you have and the knowledge that you have in the work that you do. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Thank you for being here and sharing all of these examples and experiences. The dignity of risk, that statement alone is going to stay with me. And I probably have to think about that 100 times a day with my son as I watch him navigate lots of situations as well. But thank you so much. It's always great to see you. It's always great to talk with you. I really appreciate you sharing everything today.
And thank you. I
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Okay.
Lindsey, thank you so much for sharing your time and for such a wonderful conversation. Your passion and energy are palpable. Your experience and results speak for themselves. And the fact that you and your team have a 93% retention rate with the people you help place is amazing. There are so many lessons we can learn from what you and your team do, from your approach, from the lessons that you've learned communicating with others and helping so many people see the world and see people differently. And the thing that I do keep going back to is that dignity of risk and what that means, not only for the people that you help get back into the workforce, but how that can help us all as parents, as bosses, as leaders, and beyond. Thank you so very much for all that you shared with us today. Thank you all for taking the time to join us and be here once again. We truly appreciate that. And of course, thank our sponsors one more time before we go. HumanTell. Head over to humantel.com and enter the code Inclusive25 for 25% off all of their best-in-class online self-paced training to learn how to identify in real time what people are likely thinking and feeling by identifying their changing emotions through their facial expressions and nonverbal communication. It's over at humantel.com. I highly recommend it. I've done it all myself. Head over to certifiedinterviewer.com to learn more about the International Association of Interviewers, explore their catalog of resources, all of their online and in-person events around the country, learn what it takes to join the association, what it might mean for you and your team, and explore the Certified Forensic Interviewer designation. What does it take to qualify, earn, and maintain the designation, and what it can mean for your career? All that and more at certifiedinterviewer.com. And Inclusive. That's where you can go to learn more about the customized educational events that our clients ask us to facilitate in order to help their leaders encourage people to share sensitive information under vulnerable circumstances in the face of consequences by helping people save face and feel better about participating in difficult conversations across multiple contexts: leadership, sales, negotiation, interviewing, and beyond. All of that and more at inclusive.com. Thank you all so much for continuing to be here week after week. Please take a couple seconds, like the show, subscribe to the show, share the show, tell your friends about it, leave feedback. What you like? What would you like to hear more of? Who would you like to hear from? We would really like to hear it. Thank you all very much. Stay safe, take care of each other, and we'll see you next time.